What's going on YouTube? So today we're going to be comparing my G4 850 Summit SP with a boosted turbo kit to the new G5 Skidoo platform, specifically the Turbo R. I'm seriously debating getting rid of my current G4 here and getting into the new G5. But in this video, I'm just going to give you a rundown on my current sled, everything I like, everything I don't like, especially with these aftermarket turbo setups. And I'm really looking for feedback on anyone who has a stock turbo currently. So starting in 20 and a half. Of course, right after I buy this sled, that's a 2020, the stock turbos come out. But anyways, that's usually how it goes. Anyone with a factory turbo sled, please comment below any issues you've had, if you absolutely love the sled, if you would buy another one, specifically the G5 850 Turbo R. I've never been tempted by a new sled as much as I have been right now. Those new Turbo Rs look sick. And if this is your first time on the channel, I am obsessed with Boost, if you can't tell by the Turbo Summit, the big single turbo Supra, or my daily driver, the boosted 6-liter SS. If you guys like this kind of stuff, I got lots of other video ideas coming with these toys as well, but that's for a later date. Today, we're talking sleds, so let's get into it. So this is just a base model SP, base model shocks there. It does have the 165 3-inch track. It does have shot start. So it's more or less your basic Skidoo setup. Like I said earlier, this is a Boost It kit. Boost It isn't in business anymore. They're very similar to Redline kits now. The kit itself is really good quality. I really like the closed loop oiling system here. So you're not hacking up your stock oil injection lines. Completely separate reservoir. I got the Boost T here, manual boost controller. So you can crank up the boost, really easy. The fuel commander here, this is just to control your secondary injectors for the turbo. Unfortunately on these, you can't tune the stock injectors, which is a pain in the ass because if you guys have ran aftermarket turbos before, you know they're a bit boggy down low. That initial tip-in throttle, you can't really pull fuel out of the stock injectors. It's still fueling just like the stock sled would. You only have additional fuel from this secondary controller for the secondary injectors once you start hitting boost. So you basically have a rich bog from a dead stop when you grab a handful of throttle, and it doesn't run the cleanest until you get some boost behind you. I do have a quick little video that demonstrates how responsive this turbo is and that initial tip-in lag. I'll play it right now. So as you can see, I had really good throttle response on and off the throttle, did that little bow tie and landed back in the snow. And then once the RPM came back down, grabbed a handful of throttle, and with that little bit of load on the track being sunk into the snow, you could really hear that bog just for a split second there. So that's what I'm talking about, guys. It can be very frustrating at times. If you're on the verge of getting stuck and you need to hammer out of a little trench or a hole, you grab wide open throttle and that split second bog almost just spins the track just enough to dig it down a little bit before boost hits. So you're almost trenching before you're even under load, and it can really mess you up. Coming around to the other side of the sled, you can see it is kind of a tight fit for a lot of the aftermarket stuff. I have a blow off valve there. It's kind of almost touching your belt cover. Like any aftermarket stuff, fitment isn't always the best, and it can make it really hard to work on sometimes. Something as simple as intercooler boots and my fresh air intake here, the fitment is so tight. If you want to take the hood off, it just makes it so frustrating to work on and wiggle everything back into place. Like there's just no clearance on a lot of this stuff. another very frustrating part about aftermarket stuff. Trying to wiggle the hood on and off, something so simple just becomes a nightmare. Quick look from the back of the sled. You can see the intercooler right in the center there. In my opinion, all these aftermarket kits that don't come with intercoolers are stupid. Intercoolers save reeds on 2 strokes. You got the coolant running right through the intake, and it significantly helps your intake air temps. High intake air temps eat reeds. And in a performance engine like this, that's already questioning the reliability, making big power, why do you want to add another failure point for no reason? Get a new intercooler, guys. They will save you in the long run. The last thing I want is to get stranded on the mountain for something that's as simple as a reed. So that is the basic setup, guys. I run it at about 6 to 7 pounds of boost. Engine-wise, it's been nothing but reliable, so I can't complain about anything engine-wise. This thing is a beast. It does everything I ask it to. I really like that recirculating blow-off valve, how it dumps back into the intake. It keeps it super responsive when you're in motion. And as you're chopping throttle, it blows any snow away from your intake. I've never had this thing bog out in deep days, which is awesome. And the other big upside to these aftermarket kits is they just make a ton of power. And it's so easy to adjust with that manual boost controller. I haven't compared to a stock G5 yet, but the older generation G4 stock turbos, they don't compare to this at all. Now, to be fair, those first generation turbos weren't trying to make more power. They were just trying to compensate for altitude so you don't lose power in the mountains, which fair enough. These aftermarket turbos hit hard at all elevations. That's kind of their biggest selling feature. But now with the new G5 Turbo R, they're making more power at all elevations. And I think the benefits from the factory turbo are gonna outweigh some of the cons of these older turbo kits that I have. And these aftermarket turbos sound so good. They are loud. And I'm not talking about pipe noise. I'm getting older. I don't like pipes that are loud just to be loud. I'm talking about the turbo itself. It whistles, it surges, it makes all the right noises. That blow-off valve is super loud. Like, these aftermarket turbos are way louder than the factory ones, and they just sound amazing. You know this sled is boosted from across a mountain range. Like, you can hear it coming. It is crazy, and it sounds so good. Not obnoxiously loud, like clean turbo quality sound. So let's list some of the cons of this turbo setup. Number 1, obviously you lose your warranty. Anything mechanical that's gonna fail, and you will have failures, none of that's warranty. So big con there for a majority of the riders. Con number 2, we already touched on a little bit. The fitment of everything in here is so tight, it's kind of a nightmare. The intercooler piping's a disaster, lots of rub points. You have to cut up your stock intake air box to plumb that stuff into. You got to cut where the muffler goes out. So that's all cut up. Like lots of modifying to install this kit, we'll say. And just kind of tuck in fuel controllers and stuff like that in where you can. Fitment's not great. Does it work? Yes. Does it make it a pain to work on? Yes. Anything you want to do on this sled takes twice as long as a stock sled. We already talked about the fuel controller and the bog that these sleds have. So that's frustrating. Not going to touch on that more. The other thing is heat. These turbos make a ton of heat, and this G4 sled does not displace all of that heat efficiently, in my opinion, especially with the stock hood. You see a lot of guys with the aftermarket turbos doing the full vented hood, and I get it, like these sleds run hot, and that's making the reliability go way down. For example, belts. I can overheat a belt in this thing if I'm heavy on the throttle for probably half hour straight without letting it cool. These things I had the sled grenade belt. Very likely my fault for overheating it. You notice the heat even in the coolant temp. I like to keep an eye on my digital coolant temp on the little gauge there. And normal operating conditions, these sleds run low 40s, mid 40s Celsius. And if you're doing a long pull or you're just holding throttle wide open for long periods of time, you can get deep into the 50s, like high 50s, pushing 60 degrees. And that is a big jump. So I can only imagine what the intake air temps are, even with that intercooler. So that just goes to show how much worse a non-intercoolered kit would be. And that's in good snow as well. So proper cooling under the skid there, ideal conditions basically. Still running really hot if you're heavy on the throttle long periods of time. I've sheared the bolts clean off my secondary before, so I got stranded because of that. Do I blame the sled? Probably not. Again, I might have overheated those clutches. Those bolts could have failed prematurely because of rider error, or just because of the sheer power that this thing's making. And my last and biggest complaint, again, kind of my fault for not upgrading the drivers on this sled. So they are stock drivers. And with the power that the sled's making, I can get it to ratchet and slip once in a while. Not very often. You kind of have to jump the sled, and as you land or compress the suspension all the way, if you're wide open full boost as you're coming down and compressing the suspension, you can get it to slip and ratchet just a little bit. So it only happens under certain situations that I'm aware of, so I ride accordingly. But again, just something to keep in mind, and it's a pain in the ass when it happens. So lots of little annoying issues like that would be completely gone with the new G5. That's basically designed to make decent power right from the get-go. And the thing I really like about those G5s is they move a lot of air over that clutch side panel. So those clutches now being completely sealed off from the engine bay, not getting heat soak. I just think it's a really good design that way. Hopefully all those premature belt failures should be completely gone. And that belt temp sensor is awesome. If I would have had something like that on this sled, I don't think I ever would have had a blown belt, and possibly never would have blown up my secondary. So that I think is a really good setup, and it's so simple. Like, I just like it. Information is always good, so the more info these sleds can give you, the better. The new G5 Summit R, I just think is gonna displace heat better in every aspect, just because it's designed that way right from the get-go. So big pro from these G4 platforms like I have. So with that being said about the new G5 displacing all that heat properly, that's going to be a big part of their warranty. Like, you're getting this 180 horse with warranty, which is awesome. Like, what a great time to be a sledder. The tech has came so far. If they can reliably make that 180 horse all day, that is amazing. That's probably one of the biggest selling features. And with their turbo setup, you're gonna eliminate all the lag, so you're not having any of those bogging issues. You can tune them properly. I've seen companies like Bikeman Performance already releasing tunes for the new G5, which is awesome. They're gonna have tons of support. People are just gonna be all over these things. You put a small, mild 10, 20 horse tune on it, you're gonna be right back at the level where this aftermarket turbo is, with almost no downsides, if they're reliable. Of course, that is the biggest downside to the first year of anything. They're so new, they changed so many things on that new G5. We don't know if they're gonna be reliable yet. You're taking a gamble buying a sled like that. And of course, with the price of these things, that's a big gamble. If I sold this sled even for top dollar, I'd still be spending 10 to 12 grand to get into one of those new G5s, which is a lot of money. And if it's not reliable, yeah, I would be frustrated. So is that a gamble you're willing to take? That's a question I can't answer for you guys. That's a question I'm trying to decide for myself with this video. So comment below and let me know, would you take that risk? Or do I ride this sled for another year or two, wait for those G5s to figure out what their issues are, hopefully remedy those issues over the next year or two, and then get into something that's going to be more familiar, that you're more comfortable spending that kind of money on. One downside to the new G5s, in my opinion, is I don't think they're running an intercooler, which in stock form probably won't affect most guys. But if you're like me, I don't like running anything stock. I would definitely be tuning mine. And even with a 10, 20 horse tune, I would be worried about my intake air temps and those reeds, if they haven't upgraded reeds. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but do these things have an intercooler? I don't think they do. And did they change reeds at all? I don't think they did that either. So definitely one of the main reliability issues I could potentially see guys having with modded G5s. Stock form, they're gonna be fine. Or else they wouldn't be warranting these sleds. Another con to the G5 is just the turbo placement. It could be a pro or a con. It's a good thing that the weight is kind of distributed equally in the center of the sled, but there's so much plumbing and of course your intake air valves and everything, a bunch of extra sensors. There's a lot more stuff under that hood, which is going to make it just as hard to work on as my sled. Sure, the fitment will be a little bit better than these aftermarket kits, but just the sheer amount of stuff under that hood, it's still going to take a long time to do any work on that sled compared to a non-turbo. That's just a sacrifice you have to make to have the power that these sleds do. And I'm willing to sacrifice that ease of working on something. I also like the fact that the new G5s on the expert platform got rid of T-Motion. I think as your skills develop as a rider, the T-Motion is definitely something most guys want to ditch. I've never experienced riding without T-Motion yet. I've always been a diehard Skidoo guy, but over the years, I definitely find myself overcorrecting on this T-Motion skid, even though I'm not a new rider. Like there's just some times where it gets a little squirrely on you. So that solid skid is gonna be pretty sick. And of course, other little accessories like the limiter strap, I really like that because I'm usually the goon rider with my strap all the way loose as it can go, just to be doing bow ties, re-entries, stuff like that. And then any kind of hill climb, my skis are still facing noon and I'm struggling to get up anything steep. So nice touch on the new platforms there. And I really like that there's no reservoir to be topping up oil on those factory turbos. Because easy as it is to top this one up, you're always trying to see this little sight glass in there, and it's really hard to look in there and find it. And then when you do go to top this up, you're spilling a little bit of oil in there, you're trying to find somebody with a funnel. Just little things here and there that would be nice with the new sled. So now I am starting to split hairs, but let me know what you guys think. If you had my current sled right now, ride it, sell it, what would you do? Would you get a new G5? My dealer recently just got 2 new G5 Turbo Rs. One with the big screen, one without. I would probably go without the big screen just because, well, with my riding style, I do a lot of time with my bars upside down in the snow, and I feel like that screen could get damaged. I do like that their intakes are a little beefier than the little frog skin turbo intakes that the first generation turbo had. They're super flimsy and always came apart. But I also think the intakes on the new G5s being completely flush are prone to being punctured when you're rolling the sled, even though they are a better mesh. So, things to consider. And I'm really on the fence, guys. I personally don't mind the look of the new Ninja Turtle G5s, but it's kind of one of those things, you love it or hate it. I think most guys will come around after a year or two just being familiar with seeing them. Seeing them in person, I do think they look a little better than the pictures. Stock LEDs, that's definitely a nice touch. If you're adding LEDs to these older gens like I have, they usually don't fit that nice behind the headlight housing. My old XM was really bad. This one's definitely a lot better than the XM. But that's it for this video. I think I covered most of the things I wanted to, but let's start a discussion in the comments below. Maybe you've rode a new Polaris boost. I really like those sleds too. I think they're lacking in the accessory department, like the link setup on the Skidoo's pretty much the best setup out there for accessories in my opinion. If Polaris could make a reliable engine, I think that would be a really good comparable sled to the new Skidoo Turbo R. But right now, I just don't think they're reliable enough, so I'm sticking with the Do. All you factory turbo riders, you know what to do. Drop some knowledge below. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.